our oath
Thanks,
of
Ryan.
office.
Done. That's it.
We will call meeting to order. First meeting of the 2016-17 school term. The newly elected members can come up for their oath of office. Take it right over here on the side.
We'll put you in the middle if you
Yeah,
want.
it's right over here.
I'll state the oath and if you agree to the terms of the, as I do. You solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, and that you will faithfully and impartially perform your duties as a member of the school board of the Madison Central School District, Lake County, South Dakota, to the best of your ability, and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified.
I do.
If you'll sign your oath, this one is yours. This one is yours. Here's your certificate of election.
I have a pen here, you can have real quickly.
Sure. Yes.
You know, mention us to visit City Hall.
Look at there, she's right in.
Right.
We'll teach you how to log in on the network next time.
Sure.
Not too much in the first meeting.
And with that, we'll move to the election of the president. Call for nominations of a president.
I nominate Tom Carroll.
Second.
Actually, we don't need a second, but
I know, but I just looking over seconded it.
if is there any other nominations? If there's no other nominations, we call that nomination ceased and unanimous ballot be cast. Anybody like to make a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
President Farrell?
One abstention?
You want to abstain from that?
Yeah.
Got it.
My mama told me never to vote for myself. All right, so I guess I take over then, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to continue to serve. Next item is to elect a vice president. And so I would open nominations for that position.
Miss Campbell Sims.
We have a motion for Ms. Kamala Sims. Any other motions for nominations? Hearing none, then would someone wish to make a motion to cast a nomination cease and cast a unanimous ballot for Mrs. Sims?
So moved.
Mr. Morris moves. I'll second that, since I abstained on the other one. Further questions? All in favor of Mrs. Sims for election of vice president through a unanimous ballot, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved, nay. Congratulations, Tammy, again. Item number 6 then is approval of the agenda, which we have printed and distributed. I would entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Mrs. Sims moves. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moore. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Next, we have personnel actions. Mr. Jorgensen, you're going to talk on one of those, is that correct? Or-
Sure.
And then Mr. Shaw, you're going to talk on the other possibly? Okay.
Paul Davis turned in on June 20th a resignation effective for July 8th from his custodial position. It's my understanding that Mr. Davis is relocating to a different part, so we have a resignation.
Okay. And Mr. Shaw?
We want to add a co-advisor with our FFA. Our numbers are getting up there quite high. We're at over 100 kids in FFA, and it's nice to have that extra body in there when we travel. Lori is also, we did a position change on Lori last year, but she is still teaching ag classes for us, so that's why we brought that to the board.
So I have a recommendation from the administration on the personnel actions, the resignation, and the contract change. Anyone wish to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Moore. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Cecil. Further Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the personnel action signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Declare that is passed. Item number 8, consider approval of open enrollment application 17-1, 17-2. Mr. Jorgensen.
I have two open enrollment applications. One is from a situation where they already have students going here. Talking to administration, we recommend both these be approved.
Both are inward bound open enrollment applications for the district. So we need to take formal action on those. Anyone wish to make the motion to take action on and approve open enrollment application 17-1 and 17-2?
So moved.
Mrs. Sims, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. 9, I think we can bypass. We have no one for that. Number 10 is conflict of interest disclosures, and I have one. This is the new law that went into effect the 1st of July. And I have a potential conflict of interest with my continued employment with Dakota State. And so I have filled out the form, the fact that I am an employee of Dakota State and also a member of the Board of Education. And then I also worked with and helped develop our facilities use agreement with Dakota State for gymnasium space, classroom spaces, etc. And that's a 5-year agreement, so I'm going to submit that for consideration. Do I just do all of them together, Mitch? Probably be the simplest. Leo, do you want to talk on yours for a minute also? Go back or?
I guess my conflict is I work at First Bank and Trust and the Madison Central Schools deposit at the bank where I work, and so I'm just putting that down and just that I will be present and that there'll be other tellers available to take in the deposit, that I don't have to touch the deposits to keep out of conflict.
So again, this would be something, at least at the early going, we may be doing on a monthly basis as either contracts come forward or other issues. And Mr. Moore will be doing one probably in August, or do you want to?
I just haven't had time to print it out and do
All right.
it with everything that's going on.
Yeah, well, let's just do yours in August.
But I'll do mine in August.
Okay, but this is something from the board's perspective that is required in the new legislation out of House Bill, I believe it was 1124, and so we'll try to get these done. We'll actually have a place on the agenda, and if there is none, we'll just go by it each time. So then what has to happen, and I think at this point in time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Cammie since I'm part of it. I should have told you this. Basically, the board has the option of taking 3 actions. Now, how is this going to work if we each abstain? We won't have a majority vote.
I think you're gonna have to do them
Do them
one
separate,
at a time.
yeah.
Okay, so why don't you do mine and then I can do it for, why don't I do Leah's? And then we can, you got yours there too, Leah, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so that's probably the best way to deal with it is the fact that we'll fill a form. These all go to the Secretary of State's office, correct, Mitch?
I think the Auditor General's.
Auditor General's office on there, and so the fact that we've received the written statement that we have, and the 3 options of the board are the request of the waiver was denied because the terms of the contract were not considered fair and reasonable. The request for the waiver was authorized because of the term of contract are fair, reasonable, and not contrary to the public interest. Or the third is the request for waiver was authorized because the term contract are reasonable and not contrary, but they could attach conditions to that. So I guess I would think in the case of Leah's that we would want to take number 2 was authorized because the terms of contract are fair, reasonable, and not contrary to public interest. Would we agree with that? So that would be what the motion would be. Would someone wish to make that motion? Mrs. Sims makes the motion on Mrs. Cecil's waiver. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Moore. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? Okay, motion carried.
So then, in regards to Tom's,
9th, 11th also.
okay, dated on 7/11 regarding his notice with the Dakota State University and Madison Central Schools. We have the request for waiver was denied because the terms of the contract were not considered fair and reasonable. The request for waiver was authorized because the terms of the contract are fair, reasonable, and not contrary to the public interest. Or the request for waiver was authorized because the terms of the contract are fair, reasonable, and not contrary to the public interest, and the following conditions are subject to that. So, do I have a motion
So moved.
for the second one?
Yes, for the
The,
second one.
request for waiver was authorized because the terms of the contract are fair, reasonable, and not contrary to the public interest. So moved by Sean,
Second.
seconded by Charlie. Can we vote on that? Okay. All opposed? All in agreement?
Aye.
Aye. So, good.
We'll get some more practice. We'll get some more practice.
Just testing. see
I
what
mark
you
each of
think.
you as abstaining from your own.
Pardon?
I mark each of you as abstaining.
Abstain from our own, yep,
Okay.
yep. And then I'll fill these out and sign it as we go.
Yeah.
Yep, okay,
Okay.
all right. Continuing on then. Administrators report, Mr. Jorgensen, the middle school innovation grant.
Yeah, on my first day of work, it was sort of a nice phone call from the department. I've had to have one where they were calling and giving us good news. I forwarded that information on to Dr. Cook, and he had sent out an email. I'll read his email. Madison Middle School teachers, Betsy Schomburg, Megan Blocky, Cotton Cook, and Joanne Kaloff applied for a South Dakota Department of Ed Innovation Grant in May of 2016. The district was notified that our Makerspace grant has been awarded. We applied for $44,000 to purchase science, technology, engineering, and mathematics products to be placed in the library for students to use during cruise classes and power hours. This grant will provide our students with the opportunity to use their creative thinking skills and imagination in an unstructured environment. As far as we know, it was fully funded. I have not got confirmation on all that, but that information came to us on Wednesday, actually the second day I was here. So it's good news, and we're assuming right now that it's for the full amount.
Excellent. That's great.
Adam, anything you want to add until we get to your part of the agenda?
No.
Okay. Mr. Brooks, anything else you need to add? Isn't on the agenda? Okay, then moving on to a series of consent items, items 12 through 17, designation of the official newspaper being the Madison Daily Leader, designation of bank depositories, Wells Fargo Bank, First Bank and Trust, Great Western Bank, Dakota Land Federal Credit Union, and East River. Item number 14 then is Mr. Mitchell Brooks, a business manager, is a treasurer of all funds of the school district, and authorizing him to sign all checks approved by the board, including trust and agency and impact fund. Appoint board president as co-signer of all checks approved by the board, and authorize Joel Jorgensen, superintendent, or another board member to sign the checks in the absence of the business manager or board president. Now, were we going to actually name some, or just leave that as where it was, is what we decided? And then we just have the signatures taken care of as needed.
You know, I think law allows if any board member can sign.
Okay.
And we do have a signature card, you probably get the president, vice president to sign on it, and then if you needed to go further, you can do it at that time.
Okay? So that would be, at least initially, Cammie and myself from the board's perspective. Designated bonded employee, business manager, and bookkeeper, $100,000 each. And our activities director, Mr. Postma, $15,000. Number 16 is designate our legal counsel as Lammers and Clybecker. And then number 17, which is included as a part of this, is appoint Mr. Brooks, business manager, as authorized responsible for the food service program, Title I and IDEA federal funding applications, and Mr. Jorgensen is authorized representative for all other federal and state programs. So I'd entertain a motion for those consent items that we need to do on an annual basis.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Moore, is there a second? Second by Mrs. Sims. Further questions, discussions? All in favor of the consent items 12 through 17 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. One more group, 18 to 23, approve joining the Associated School Boards of South Dakota sponsored emergency school bus assistance pack. We had an opportunity to use that this year, in fact. Approve the publication of the staff salaries, which again were required by law to do for the 2016-2017 school year. Also then the standing committees, I'm assuming everyone had an opportunity from the board to look at those, and you're comfortable with the staff assignments there? Or board assignments. We also need to appoint surplus property appraisers, and that would be Ricky Hansen, Rob Hanemichael, and Stan Fodds. And then designate our regular board meetings the second Monday at 5:30. Is the pleasure of the board staying at 5:30 yet? Okay. And either I missed a 23.
You didn't say 23 yet.
Okay, and then 23 is the taking advantage of our policies, make the official district policies for the year. Additions and revisions may be necessary during the year. So those would be our items 18 through 23. Anyone wish to pull any of those out or have further discussion or a motion to approve all the consent items? So moved by Mrs. Sims. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moore. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the consent items 18 to 23 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Declare those have passed. Mr. Nelson, you're up.
Oh, all right.
Consider support for Constitutional Amendment R.
Okay, thank you, President Tom. Welcome to new Superintendent Joel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you to all the board for agreeing to address this issue and give me a few minutes to talk about Amendment R. First of all, I'm Jeff Nelson. I know many of you, all of you actually, maybe except Joel. And during my professional career with East River, was very active and have remained active since I retired with at least one of the technical institutes, Mitchell Technical Institute. To put that in perspective, in this community, the 125 person workforce in East River has about 45% of those employees who have been trained graduated from one of the technical institutes in South Dakota. So it's an important part of what Amendment R is about. Amendment R is about strengthening the ability of the technical institutes in this state, there are 4, as you may know, to be able to be recognized as the K through 12 as well as higher education in our Constitution. Article 14 of the state Constitution was last amended in 1945. And I don't know what that amendment was. I don't remember, actually. I don't think I see anybody around the table that does. The technical institutes were created legislatively in 1965. So since that time, they have been assigned to and are aligned with the school districts in the communities in which they are located. But they are not recognized constitutionally. As this board is aware, and I know this school board has taken steps to be very supportive of, engaging in, and I think really refurbishing, restoring a very strong commitment to career technical education in this school district. focused on providing opportunity along with higher education for technical education as well. The amendment that is being proposed to give recognition to the technical institutes in the Constitution was adopted almost unanimously. I guess there was one vote against it by all members of the legislature a year ago in 2015. The material that I think was in your board, with your board packet gives you the copy of that resolution. It was House Joint Resolution 1003. And it's pretty straightforward in that it makes a clear division of the responsibility for the type of degrees that will be the responsibility of the Board of Regents and of the technical institutes. And secondly, gives a clear definition of the responsibility for the technical institutes to be governed in some manner, and that manner has not yet been determined, and won't be unless, I suspect, unless this amendment is passed by the South Dakota legislature. So that's the background. The simple description of Amendment R is to put a firmer foundation under the technical institutes in this state to be able to address the critical workforce needs that are apparent in South Dakota. Virtually every community, including this one, has trouble recruiting and hiring qualified employees. The technical institutes, about a year and a half ago, I serve on the Strategic Advisory Council for MTI as well as its foundation board, and engaged in discussions about the continuing crisis and challenges that the TIs have faced in securing adequate funding. By and large, the tuition for the technical institutes in virtually every program that is offered is substantially higher than any of our surrounding states. Certainly a crisis. The other aspect of the concern that was identified by the TIs, the technical institutes, a year and a half ago was that as conversations are and have been occurring on education matters, the TIs end up almost being an afterthought. So it was agreed that the 4 technical institutes would ask industry, not the schools themselves, but people involved in the various industries that rely on those technical institutes to provide training for a skilled workforce. What is called a Skilled Workforce Advocacy Council has been formed with representatives from the different disciplines in each of the 4 technical schools to act as an independent volunteer voice for bringing more attention to and providing a better foundation for the TIs. This Amendment R, House Joint Resolution 103, rose out of a request from many of the businesses in this state that said we need to do a better job in this area. So the legislature adopted this. Interestingly enough, the Board of Regents and the Technical Institute sat down, drafted this legislation. The Board of Regents supported it. The legislature supported it. The governor supported it. You may have seen a couple of weeks ago, the governor had his first public statement on what is now Amendment R, which is House Joint Resolution 103. So I'm kind of loosely affiliated with a group of volunteers who are now making a request similar to the one that I bring to this school board tonight, to the larger school districts in the state, to ask if you would consider adopting a resolution, which was also included in your board materials. The resolution, if you've had a chance to read it, is nonpartisan. This is not a partisan issue. It is a issue about the future of creating opportunities for students who will graduate from Madison and schools throughout South Dakota to go forward either to college or to healthy, affordable technical institutes. So the resolution is, I think, fairly straightforward. I hope you've had a chance to read it. The resolved portion of it is very straightforward. It simply is a expression of support for the adoption of Amendment R. This will be one of 10 initiated or constitutional measures on the ballot this fall. So it's hopefully not going to be as controversial as some of them may be, but it is really an essential step for education in South Dakota. So, President Tom, I'll just stop with that brief description, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks around the board table might have.
Are there any groups that are against this?
To my knowledge, there are not, Sean. I think the fact that there was a lot of time put into the front end of this to get the Board of Regents to come together so that none of the constituencies that are very focused on higher education, I think they are satisfied that this is a fair way to do it. Certainly the state chamber, the retailers, I mean, you can just, the rural electric cooperatives, I think the major industries in the state have all expressed a strong desire to see this as a next step to put a firmer foundation on the technical institutes. This is really the beginning, I think, if it is adopted. It's the beginning of more attention to technical education as an option in the state. So I'm not aware of any. It's hard for me to believe Imperial, they can't hardly agree on what time of the day it is, much less some other issues. But I think this one will. I think the biggest challenge for this issue is the education part of it, to convince people that this is a positive step. It's not going to cost the state anything. It's really modernizing our recognition of technical institutes for future workforce development.
May I talk a little bit, Jeff, about some of the other school boards you're aware of that have passed this resolution?
You know, I should have gotten that list, Tom. Sioux Falls did, I think, it's my understanding that, as I said, the larger schools, Aberdeen, Pierre, Yankton, Vermillion, Rapid City, concurrently these asks are being made. The hope is that the larger schools will lead the way in considering this, and if they adopt that, I think by the middle of August, then the group that's supporting this is going to try and move to the next level of schools in the state. But I don't have that list. If you would like for me to get that, I could. But
I think it's interesting to know that several, the larger districts have done this, Sioux Falls being one that, and of course the way it currently sits, the Sioux Falls School Board has the regulations over Southeast, and same in Mitchell School Board does that, Watertown the same thing with Lake Area, and Rapid City the same with Western Dakota. And imagine those larger districts, and then on top of that having a vocational technical institute that you're taking care of also as a board is quite an undertaking. So I think that ultimately they recognize, these larger boards recognize that importance also. Anyone be willing to make a motion on the resolution that we support this?
So moved.
Mr. Miller makes that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Moore. Any further questions or discussions? Thank you, Jeff, for coming to us with this.
You bet, Tom.
And everything. Call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
You bet. Thank you.
Item number 25, Mr. Zay, you get to come down now, huh?
Well, actually, I'm gonna let Bish speak, he's got all the paperwork. I'm here for questions.
All right.
In the last meeting, we went to seek bids, and then on July 1st, we had our bid opening. For that, we received 3 bids that came in. One bid was from Swift Construction from Sioux Falls, $304,500. Another bid was from W/S Construction in Sioux Falls, $340,000. And then the low bid was Amer Construction from Madison, $278,000. With the bids though, they all came in higher than what we had funds available for. And our architect, Mr. Zay, met with Amer Construction and they worked the project down, decreasing the size of the building a little bit, changing a little bit of the drainage structure, and then the in-floor heat where the main pieces kind of changed to get it within the scope and the size and the dollar amount which we could do with our grant. And so then when they were completed, the amount came to $216,375. And we have a contract, and that would be with Amer Construction for the building of that building for that amount.
And the grant dollars we have available
It's
is?
about 250.
250.
There's more than, we have our architect fees and then a few of the equipping of that facility that come out of that grant also.
Okay.
And Mr. Zay is here with any questions on.
Start date, do you know?
As soon as he gets his bonds in and all his paperwork in, he can start. I talked to Ryan, the drawings have been approved, so as soon as Don goes in and picks up his building permit, where to go?
What was the change in size?
We took about 5 foot out of the north-south dimension, and 3 foot out of the east-west dimension.
Did you say something in drainage?
And then we had it so that it would take up part of the parking lot and pipe into the parking lot, but we're gonna have it kind of come off the side into a green space area, so we don't have to disturb the parking lot, or if that kind of makes sense to it, having it piped underneath.
Adam, you're good with it?
Yeah, you bet. That was a part of the change stuff last week when we went through it.
Okay. Just so you're settled with it.
Yeah, anything is better than nothing. I think we're still gonna get a beautiful building out of it, and it's gonna serve the needs very, very well, so.
So I would entertain a motion that we consider acceptance of the bid from Amer Construction.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Moore, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Sims. Further questions or discussion?
Cecil.
Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not used to having 2 females on my right, okay? I have to retrain myself now.
Actually, you have to look now.
Yeah. When I had the ladies split up, it was easy. It was either a left or a right. So Mrs. Cecil gets the second. Is there further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the contract for the CTE Auto Shop building, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Declare the motion is passed. Thanks once again, Gary.
We want you. We'll have it done for you before the end of the year.
All right, Mr. Shaw, your opportunity.
For 2 years during board retreats, I talked about adding computer programming into our curriculum as a core requirement. So what this does is this will identify, we're going to change our credit requirements from 22 to 22 and a half credits it will start with our sophomores this year. So this year sophomores and on down will have to take computer programming, the juniors and seniors will not. When we also wrote the EPSCoR grant, one of the things was that we would add computer programming into our graduation requirements, which you are doing. My big thing is I think we need to stay ahead of the game. A lot of states are making this a graduation requirement anyways, and I would rather be ahead of the game and have it in now while we have the opportunity and the equipment and things like that in place to kind of get that foundation built. So that's the only change we really have.
It requires no additional staff because of?
Well, because we have Mr. Leesinger.
Right, and then the actual applications is eventually going to be?
Right, the computer apps, we're hoping to move into the middle school. It's more, that's introductory, Word, Excel, things like that, things they're already doing anyways. So our goal is eventually to get that rolled down into the middle school so that they'll take computer apps as 8th graders and then the computer science as freshmen. But we'll get them the high school credit while they're still in middle school for it. So. When I sat on the CTE standards revisions last year, that there was a pretty heavy talk about moving the apps down and making programming required down the road. So I think we'll be ahead of the game by doing this, and that's our whole goal.
So his current time can already.
Yep, this year he'll teach all the computer apps and all the programming, and then we have a couple of computer electives, so.
So recommendation is to change our J, or that's I, isn't it?
IKF.
That's IKF graduation requirement from a 1/2 credit and putting computer programming, computer studies, I guess is what it's going to be, called as a 1 unit instead of a 1/2 unit. Anyone wish to make that as a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Moore makes that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. I even looked that time, okay. Mrs. Cecil has made the second. Further questions or discussion? The big thing is, I think it's going to, as Adam said, really move us forward and put us ahead of where we need to be. There's just so much emphasis today on the need for technology workers than there has ever been before, and what a huge step to do that. So, motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of modification of IKF graduation requirements signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Declare that as passed. We need to acknowledge the high school handbook. You want to talk about it?
I just made a few changes. It wasn't major. I found a few things that contradicted themselves. I changed those. In our attendance policy, we were sending out letter after letter after letter. We'd send them out at the 4th absence, the 5th absence, the 6th absence. So I took the 4th absence out. We're going to send one letter at the 5th. If they hit the 6th absence, they're going to have to come in and meet with myself, Mr. Postma, the counselor, and the parent and the student. We'll put an actual attendance contract in place for that child. And then if they hit 7, they'll be an automatic failure. So we just changed a few things. It was more verbiage than it was anything, so. And we did change our cell phone policy, that was the other thing. Instead of keeping phones overnight, because that tool is so vital for those kids when they're off campus, we'll have them turn them in at 8:15 to us, we'll give them back at 3 o'clock when they get in trouble for those things. So. Otherwise, it wasn't many changes at all.
That's a good deal.
It's good.
Okay, so we need a motion to acknowledge receipt. Sean?
One question, okay, it says the students must complete 22 units of credit to meet the minimum South Dakota State graduation requirements.
Mhm.
Then the next line, to participate in graduation exercises, the student must have completed 21.5 units of credit.
They have to have 21.5 to participate, so if they're half a credit short, we let them walk, but
Okay.
they don't actually get their diploma signed
Gotcha.
until they finish the half credit. And that's been a little easier to manage too with the Edgenuity. We use like a credit recovery. You get a kid that doesn't pass something, they need to come back and get a half a credit. What they'll do is they'll walk through the ceremony and then they'll come back usually and finish over the summer, and then they'll get their signed diploma. I actually have quite a few diplomas still sitting in the office kids haven't come and got. So.
Okay. So anything else in the handbook? If not, then I would entertain a motion that we acknowledge receipt of the high school handbook.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Miller gets the move and Mrs. Sims gets the second. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the acknowledgement of receipt of the high school handbook signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Declare motion is passed. Item number 28, consider approval of safe routes to school amendment. Mr. Brooks, I think that's you.
This is more formality, they're just doing some changes to this, and because we were a part of the original one, we just need to sign the amendment on it. And if you see in that paragraph 4, it kind of defines what some of the changes are for that. This just has to do with reimbursement. Nothing really on our part other than that, since we were party to the agreement at the beginning, we just need to sign on any changes that are made.
So I entertain a motion that we sign the approval of the safe routes to school amendment paperwork.
So moved.
Mrs. Sims makes a motion, a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Moore. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the safe route to school amendment signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Item number 29 then is correspondence that Mr. Jorgensen has had with the new superintendent up at Rutland there. And if you recall, we've had this done in the past, and then it wasn't done last year anyway, where Rutland has indicated that they'll be using those same 3 stops to pick up open enrolled students and take them to Rutland. And those 3 are the community center, the Living Hope Church, and then also the Flynn Field area down in Southwest 8th and Egan Avenue. So, matter of just probably recognition of that occurring, and then we have taken formal acknowledgement of that from Rutland, and we hope to, in August, bring before the board what we have also from Oldham, Normola, and Chester. So,
How many stops do the other 2?
each have 1. Each have 1. And of course, pardon?
How many students do we know that, to each of the 3 other districts? Is there that many more that go to Oldham, Ramona, or Rutland?
I think at one point in time, it was in the 30s. Don't know what it is today. And of course, they no longer have to keep filing open enrollment annually, so it's difficult to really get a track on any longer. Because they may be open enrolled out of here and then may have open enrolled out of wherever they open enrolled. There's no real tracking back on it, but I believe that they had the most at the time when we went through the opportunities to discuss with the Department of Education on the stops. And the 3 stops were what was agreed upon at that time when we went into legal matters with both the Department of Ed and the Rutland School Board too. So.
Just gonna have to set 3 people there and count how many get on.
Yeah.
What's that, Don?
I said you're just gonna have to set 3 conspicuous people out there and count the number that get on the bus if they're standing there.
Off the record, I'll tell you a story about that.
Who's the liability lying on when the children are at any of the stops?
I would assume the liability would rest with this area where the stop is. It certainly is not our liability. I would say parents, and then in the case where, 2 of them are using commercial areas, and then the Living Hope Church, I suppose, would be one. Community center, I know that they had some issues early on with supervision there, but
Parents have liability until they're on the school premises, the bus or school premises.
When Peter contacted me, he was trying to be proactive about it. He just said the same 3 stops. I just asked him to identify the 3 stops. So we were all aware of the 3 stops there. Seeing they're stopping at least, that they have that right.
so if someone wish to make a motion to consider approval of that proposal.
So,
Okay, Mrs. Sims, is there a second? And Mrs. Cecil. Opportunities for discussion, opportunity to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item number 30, set the board planning goals setting retreat. I almost wonder if we should just table that till August when we have our other 2 board members here and things. So we'll just table that, Mr. Brooks. And then the final item is an executive session according to South Dakota Codified Law 125-2, Section 3 for legal matters.